You've been told that America's $37 trillion national debt is a ticking time bomb. Politicians argue about it. Analysts panic about it. Everyday people feel its weight. Every time they buy groceries, fill up their gas tank, or try to save anything at the end of the month. But what if I told you the real story isn't about repaying that debt at all? What if the goal was never repayment? What if the real plan is to quietly erase ETAND? The government is already doing it, using tools most people still think are futuristic toys, crypto and gold. Not to save you, not to save the country, but to reset the entire financial system in a way that leaves ordinary people holding the bag. What if the US found a way to vaporize trillions without triggering panic? What if the collapse everyone's been warning you about already started, and you just didn't recognize it because it was engineered to look like innovation? Before we go deeper, quick check-in: where are you watching from? I love seeing this community grow. Drop your location in the comments, and hit subscribe if you want the unfiltered truth the mainstream won't touch. Let's get into it. If you rewind the clock, the US has always relied on one trick above all others: illusion. Illusion of stability. Illusion of wealth. Illusion that every dollar in your pocket is backed by something real. But history shows that every time the illusion starts cracking, the government introduces a new asset, a new standard, or a new loophole to keep the whole system from collapsing. And today, they're dusting off a playbook so old that most investors alive have never experienced it firsthand. They're emerging cutting-edge crypto structures with ancient gold strategies to hide the true condition of the American financial system. It sounds insane, right? But so did every major monetary shift in US history until it became the new normal. Let's go back to 1933. The country was drowning in deflation. Banks were collapsing left and right, and the average person had lost faith in the dollar. The government's solution: ban private ownership of gold, force citizens to sell their gold to the government for $20.67 per ounce, then secretly reprice it to $35. Overnight, the government expanded its balance sheet by 69%. That wasn't policy. That was financial confiscation, dressed as patriotism. Sound familiar? Because decades later, in 1971, when foreign nations started asking to redeem their dollars for real gold, Nixon slammed the gold window shut. The comfortability that once made the dollar trustworthy evaporated with one television announcement. The world switched to pure fiat system backed by nothing except the belief that the US would never let its currency collapse. But that belief depended on one thing: the US controlling the narrative around its debt. Once again, sound familiar? Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. Every time the system starts to crack, the US pivots to a new asset class to maintain control. Gold in the 1930s, fiat in the 1970s, derivatives in the 1990s and 2000s, quantitative easing after 2008. But today cracks the ones you feel every time your paycheck stretches thinner are too large to patch with traditional tricks. You can't print your way out of $37 trillion without lighting the dollar on fire. You can't raise taxes high enough without torching the economy. You can't inflate it away without risking riots. So, what's left? That's where the modern parallel comes in. Crypto and gold are being weaponized in ways the public still doesn't understand. It's not about Bitcoin taking over the world or gold becoming legal tender again. It's about the US leveraging these two assets as off-balance sheet shadows to quietly restructure the financial system. Because the real goal isn't to pay the debt. It's to absorb it, dissolve it, and redistribute it without you noticing. And the blueprint for this strategy already exists. We saw a preview in 2008, when the government used an obscure corner of the financial markets to mask trillions in toxic assets. Back then, they shoved garbage mortgage-backed securities into the shadow banking system, hid them behind AAA labels, and pretended everything was fine. Instead of letting the system crash naturally, they engineered a reset that transferred about $10 trillion in wealth from the lower and middle class to corporate and financial elites. The public thought it was a bailout. In reality, it was a recalibration. Sound familiar yet? Because what's happening today follows the same pattern but with a twist. Crypto and gold play the role derivatives used to play. A mechanism for hiding risk, shifting liabilities, and quietly recalculating the value of the dollar without admitting the system is in freefall. But to understand how they're doing it, how the U.S. is using digital assets, blockchain infrastructure, and strategic gold accumulation to disappear $37 trillion, need to understand one key development that happened behind closed doors, a development so underreported and so deeply woven into the global financial plumbing that most experts don't even know it exists. This is where everything flips. Halfway through this story lies a single mechanism, one that links crypto, gold, Federal Reserve operations, and international settlement rules. It didn't make headlines, it wasn't debated on the news. It just quietly became part of the system. And once you see it, you'll understand how the debt doesn't need to be paid. It just needs to be transformed. It all starts with a simple question. What if the U.S. found a way to store value outside the public balance sheet? What if it could redirect liabilities into assets that don't officially count as part of the national debt? And what if crypto was never about decentralization, but about building a new financial engine powerful enough to absorb multi-trillion-dollar imbalances? This mechanism has a name. A boring name. A name designed to make you yawn so you never ask questions about it. And you won't believe the name. The receipt is wilder than you think. The mechanism is called tokenized reserves integration. Sounds harmless, right? Harmless enough that if you saw it buried in a Federal Reserve working paper, you'd probably skim right past it. But behind that dull phrase is the blueprint for how the U.S. plans to quietly restructure its entire debt load using a fusion of blockchain accounting and hard asset collateralization. And if that sounds complicated, don't worry, because that's exactly why they're doing it. Complexity hides crime, and in this case, it hides a $37 trillion reset. Let's break it down. For decades, central banks have played a shell game with assets. Bonds become collateral. Collateral becomes loans. Loans become derivatives. Derivatives become off-book guarantees. Every layer adds distance between the risk and the people who feel it meaning you. But tokenization takes this game to a level we be never Instead of moving paper around, you move value inside digital wrappers that can represent anything. Currency, commodities, debt, even claims on future tax revenue. A token is just a container, and containers can hide a lot. Here's where gold comes back into the picture. After years of denying that gold mattered, central banks have quietly been buying it at the fastest rate since 1967. In 2022 alone, they bought over 1,100 tons. In 2023, another 800. China, Russia, Turkey, even the U.S., which claims its gold reserves haven. T-Changed has been moving gold around through custodial accounts so opaque that even congressional auditors can T-trace every bar. But the real play isn't the gold itself. It's what that gold can become once it's tokenized. Gold isn't just shiny metal anymore. It's collateral. Collateral that can sit outside the official balance sheet. Collateral that can be used to backstop digital dollars. Collateral that doesn't show up as debt. And the moment you pair tokenized gold with tokenized treasuries, yes, that's already happening behind the scenes. You get a shadow universe of assets that can be swapped, rehypothecated, insured, leveraged, and buried in layers of financial engineering so deep that even trained analysts give up trying to map it. This is how debt disappears, not by paying it, not by inflating it away, but by converting it into instruments that no longer count as liabilities under the traditional definitions. Think about it. If you issue a token that represents a treasury bond, but the token itself trades independently from the bond, and that token gets used as collateral in liquidity pools, central bank swaps, or settlement layers, who's tracking the original debt? Who's counting the liability? Who even owns it? The answer? Nobody, clearly enough for the public to see. This is how you erase $37 trillion without calling it erasing. You shift the accounting rules, you move the debt from column A to column C, and declare column C outside the scope of public scrutiny. It's the same trick used during the 2008 crisis, when $2.3 trillion quietly disappeared into off-balance sheet Fed facilities. Some a playbook, new technology. Now let's talk numbers because they're not just shocking, they're damning. In 2021, the Federal Reserve launched a program known as Project Hamilton. Publicly, it was described as a research collaboration on central bank digital currencies. Privately, its scaling tests showed the ability to process 1.7 million transactions per second. Not for the public, not for merchants. For settlement, that is speed designed for one thing: large-scale asset restructuring. Then in 2022, the Bank for International Settlements, the central bank of central banks, tested a system called EMP. It allowed cross-border settlements using digital tokens backed by sovereign assets. The test involved 160,000 transactions worth $22 million, but the architecture could easily scale into the trillions. By 2023, the IMF pushed its XC platform, a tokenized environment for sovereign debt issue. Its own report said tokenization could improve debt restructuring efficiency. Translation: it makes it